Turn to the word of prayer. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So I'm going to press you quite a bit early this morning, so here we go. The federal government, as we all know, is in a general shutdown. A lot of people out of work right now. Problem is that we have this enormous debt that keeps on growing, and somehow, someday, we need to be able to solve this thing. On the 17th of this month, we may default on our bills as an entire country for the very first time we've ever done in our whole history. And if we do so, who knows what the ramifications of that will be. We have no real idea. If you have CDs at the bank, you know your interest rate is nothing to write home about. And certainly it's nothing to talk to other people at the coffee shop about because it's not too great. Most young families that I know, both the mother and the father are working full-time jobs. At least one of them is probably working another part-time job on top of that in order to just make it through from week to week, month by month. Every year, as you all know, insurance premiums keep going up. The new health care system is supposed to level that out somewhat, but that'll take years before we see the effects of that. Well, notice that there's low interest rates, so you can buy a home, but of course the banks aren't loaning too much money right now because money is pretty high. Well, anybody depressed yet? Our own parish budget, if you want to get a real particular, has become a bone of contention among some people in our parish. And we're all wondering how we're going to make it through this scarcity. So here's my question. How many of you would raise your hands and say, I have more than enough. I have way too much. I have an abundance of everything I can possibly need. How many would raise their hands for that? How many would raise their hands saying, I'm not sure how we're going to make it through this week, much less the next month. The future looks pretty foggy for our nation and for our family and for our community. How many would raise your hands for that? Basically, the question is this. Are we living in a time of God's abundance? Or are we living in a time of an idol of scarcity? Which one do you believe? It's really, I know, an unfair question because I kind of set you up to raise your hands for scarcity by all the things I said. And that's where our faith comes into play. Because our faith is in direct conflict with our culture. Everything about our culture says that we're living in a time of scarcity. It says you need to have money to make money. So if you don't have any money, well, guess where that leaves you? Our faith says the exact opposite of that. That we have, and we are, and we will always be living with abundance. Because our God is a God of abundance. Does that make sense? Look around us. Look at our own checkbooks. Look at the leaders of our nation. Is there any sense anywhere that we're living in a time of abundance? How can anybody realistically say that we are now living in a time of abundance? But what does our faith say? Let's review. Genesis. We started with Genesis chapter 1 a little over a month ago. In Genesis chapter 1, what does God do? Creates everything. And God says it is good. This is good. And then on the sixth day, God creates human beings. And then God says, let everything multiply and be fruitful and fill the earth. Fish, fill the seas. Birds, fill the air. Animals and plants, fill the ground. Everything be abundant. And we say, sure. That sounds really nice. Sounds very pious. That sounds very church-like. But I suppose if you're from space and you look down on this planet, you see a beautiful orb in a dark space. But we all know better. We all know better than God. We come close to saying. You know that maybe that's why so many people are turning their backs on God. Because what God says makes no sense in our world. We know full well that there is scarcity. How dare anybody tells us that there is abundance? We are the Israelites in the wilderness. Remember, these are not just people in the Bible. They are our faith ancestors. And we are just like them. Claiming to be people of God, but not trusting or believing in God. Let's take a closer look at these Israelites, especially this really revealing passage we have that Ursula read so well. Here's what happened. The people were slaves in Egypt. There were so many Israelites that at one time Pharaoh ordered all the male infants to be drowned, thrown out and died. But that didn't reduce the population. So God and Moses freed the people from slavery. They all left. With the army of Pharaoh rushing behind them, close on their heels, they came to the Reed Sea, and through the miracle of the wind blowing in just the right direction, the people were able to cross on dry land. And when the winds changed and the Pharaoh's army came in with all the heavy chariots, they were drowned by all the rushing waters. And the people of Israel survived, escaped, and they were free. It just happened. Now they're in the wilderness. Instead of singing songs of praise, of thanksgiving for God releasing them from captivity and slavery, and now setting them free to be free people, what are they doing? They're complaining. It's not, what has God done for us lately? It's more, what is God doing for us right here and now? They just got free from being slaves. They just escaped certain death at the hands of Pharaoh's army. They are a little bit hungry, but they don't see the abundance of God. They're caught in the idol of scarcity that they grew up with when they lived with the Egyptians. Moses, they say, why have you brought us out here? Did you bring us out here just to die? Oh, when we were in Egypt, we had pots full of good beef to eat, and we had bread more than enough that anybody could eat. Will you bring us out here just to die? Pretty good, huh? The Israelites have bought in to the scarcity of Egypt, and they have ignored the abundance of God. You know what happened to them in Egypt? They came generations before, Joseph and his brothers. And because of Joseph's dreams that God gave to Joseph, the Egyptians were able to survive the drought, the 7-year drought. They had abundance because God provided for them. And so immigrants came from all over the place. Some of those immigrants were Joseph's brothers. They came and they were fed from the abundance of Egypt, but it was at a cost. First, they lost their land. Next, they lost their cattle. Third, they lost their freedoms, and they became slaves. Eventually, they bought into the scarcity of Egypt. They believed in scarcity because that's all they could see as slaves. But now they're in the wilderness. Doesn't matter now that they are free. They can't see God's abundance, for all they know is scarcity. They are locked into that mindset, and it's so hard to get out of it. What happens next to them? They complain, and what does God do? God gives them manna from heaven. They have no idea what it is. They've never seen it before. They call it, well, they say, what is it? Which literally is manna. Manna, what is it? It's the same. That's the word. Manna means, what is it? What is it? Manna. It's the same thing. And then at night, God brings them quail. So they have meat to eat at night and bread to eat during the day. They're to collect all they want for the course of the day. And some gather more and some gather less. And here's a really interesting line that we could spend a lot of time with, but we won't today. In verse 18, it says that some gathered more than they needed, some gathered less than they needed. For when all was measured out, those who had more did not have too much more, and those who had less did not have too much less. They all had enough. They all had abundance. So were the people happy? Did they believe now in the God of abundance? Did they give up their idol of scarcity? After all, they had exactly what they needed for the day. Well, of course they were not happy, for they were trapped in the idol of scarcity. So Moses tells them, collect all the manna you want for this day, but don't save any more for tomorrow, because God will provide. The God of abundance will provide for you. So what do? Do they believe that? Well, no, because they're still stuck in the idol of scarcity. So they gather all they need for the day, and then they set some aside for tomorrow. What happens to what they saved aside? It's full of worms. It's all spoiled. What a waste. Moses yelled at them, why did you not believe in the God of abundance? Why are you still stuck in the idol of scarcity? Now on the 6th day, God tells Moses and the people, collect twice as much as you need. Because on the 7th day is the day of rest. You're supposed to rest. You're not going to collect, there won't be any more manna on the 7th day. You're supposed to rest on the 7th day. Collect twice as much as you need. So they do. They collect twice as much as they need. And then, of course, they all rest on the 7th day, right? Well, no. You know what they do. A whole bunch of them go out looking for manna on the seventh day. Oh, it's not there. There's no manna. And God says to Moses, what is wrong with these people? Are they never ever going to follow my commandments? Do they not trust in the God of abundance? Why are they still stuck with the idol of scarcity? It's kind of my translation of the Bible. God forced the people into rest. God forced the people not to work. Did they ever buy into it? Well, no, they never actually ever bought into it. They always believed in a God of scarcity. Thousands of years later, 2013, we were exactly like our faith ancestors in the wilderness. We don't believe in the God of abundance either. We don't trust that God will provide. We believe in scarcity. We believe in protecting our stuff. And so the football coach of the Wisconsin Badgers has a commercial out. Well, one of the things that he decided to do when he moved to Wisconsin was to buy into an insurance company that would protect all of his stuff, his house and his property. Because we believe in the God of scarcity. We believe in the idol of scarcity, so we buy more and more guns and more ammunition because we know for certain one day our government's going to take it all away from us. We believe in the God of scarcity. So we take care of ourselves first. If there's anything left over at all, well then we'll turn and help somebody else. We believe in this God of scarcity, and so we believe it is the poor among us who are robbing us of what we have. We believe in the idol of scarcity, so we stand with the rich who simply get richer and more powerful every single day because we think one day we might be among those rich and powerful. We believe in the idol of scarcity, so we buy our lottery tickets because if we win, by golly, that will relieve all of our pressures. We believe in the God of scarcity because everything in our culture tells us that's exactly what we should do. We are told that to be the best, we are to be number one. But we all know that being number one, only one can be number one. That's the definition of scarcity. God says no to all of that. God says, look, I create you. I give you talents. I give you abilities. I give you strengths. I give you everything you need. I give you land to walk on and water to drink and air to breathe and food to eat and a community to be among. What more do you need? I am the God of abundance. To which we say, thanks God, thanks for all you give to us, but we really need just a little more of that. Heard a story of a family the other day. They were pushed to the extreme. They were doing everything they could possibly do. They worked the 2 full-time jobs, they had the part-time jobs. The kids were in every single sport there was. They were involved in everything. And then one day they said, that's enough. We've just had enough. And so they stopped the satellite connection to their television. They stopped all the sports activities and said, okay, every child, you get one sport. You don't get to do them all. You get one sport. They canceled their internet service. I think that may have been a mistake. They stopped working all these extra jobs. And what they discovered was that they now had an abundant life. They ate meals together. And the sports that their kids were involved in, they were sports of joy, no longer sports of stress. We have to go here and there, and then tomorrow we have to do these 3 things. They began to experience the abundant life of one another, and the harvesting of their gardens, and in eating meals together, and being together as family. You see, God will provide. That's the message repeated throughout the Bible. Faith-filled people get into trouble when we begin to think it's all about us and not about God. When we fall into the sin of Adam and Eve, which is the original sin, which is the sin of saying we can be like God, that's when we fail and we fall into the idol of scarcity instead of believing in the God of abundance. I have a daughter, Megan, Will. They just had a baby, Aubrey. I have pictures. Okay, as excited as they were to have this child, in July Megan was thinking, I don't know how we're going to make it. I just don't know. We look at our income and it's like, how are we going to pay for it? It's not going to happen. How are we going to pay for it? We don't know. We don't know how this is going to happen. 3 weeks ago, Will gets a different job. He now has a job with, as much as construction work gives you a guaranteed income, he has guaranteed income for the first time ever. Last week, Megan went from one company to another company, and and got hired with this other company and is making way more than she was making before. It was just by kind of accident. And now all of a sudden all our problems, and now it's like, yeah, we can pay for childcare. Now we live in abundance. Now they're not claiming God had anything to do with that, although that might be suggested to them as I go up there. So that, scarcity or abundance? Which side are you on? Scarcity, we rely on ourselves. Abundance, we rely on God. Scarcity, we spend our time and energy protecting our stuff. Abundance, we spend our time and energy wondering what God has in store for us. Scarcity, we hold everything close. Abundance, our arms are open wide. Now think really quick. Think of Jesus. Get a picture in your mind of Jesus. Get a picture in your mind of Jesus. Which picture do you have in your mind? Do you have the one of Jesus knocking on the door, hoping the door opens up to him? Do you have the picture of Jesus on the cross, guess what, with his arms wide? Do you have the picture of Jesus kneeling and having the children run up to him, again with his arms outstretched to welcome them in? Do you have the picture of Jesus as the good shepherd holding that lamb on his shoulders? Do you have the picture where Jesus isn't even in the picture because the tomb is empty? Which picture do you have? Do these pictures tell you of a God of scarcity, or do these pictures tell you of a God of abundance, who can and will do anything and everything? So faith-filled people of God, where do we live? Where do you want to live? With the idol of scarcity or the God of abundance? You know it is in our prayer, O God, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Here it is. Give us this day our daily bread. It's right there. It's both a prayer and a promise. Do we dare to live in the abundance of God?